What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. I'm joined by my best friend, Ron. We're going to run through a list of topics that I think are fascinating. Going to talk a little bit about the Big 12 and how we should be taking a look at it in the age of the COVID. Going to talk a little bit about the SEC and how everybody is riding the Florida train all of a sudden. I want to get into a little bit of the NFL, particularly as it pertains to Cam Newton. But if you haven't actually watched the OU Missouri State preview, I would encourage you to do just that, okay? Because, it's 15 minutes. I know that sounds like a long time in YouTube speak, but I think that it's a good enough time to talk about Bobby Petrino's Bears and what you can expect from them on the pay-per-view, which you can buy, like Sooner Sports TV or whatever, for $54.95 for those of you that are really about this OU football. But first, with Oklahoma defensive tackle Jalen Redmond set to opt out in the 2020 season, with more details from my colleague at OUinsider.com, Brandon Drum, the Sooner defensive line is already at DEFCON 1. Earlier this season, the Sooners lost defensive tackle Marcus Hicks and are likely to begin the season without defensive end Ronnie Perkins. With Redmond set to join those inactive players, the Sooners lost the player who led the team in sacks and the runner-up in sacks. Perkins and Redmond combined for 12.5 sacks. That's 49% of the Sooners' sack tally in 2019. Couple Perkins and Redmond's production with losing linebacker Kenneth Murray and defensive tackles Neville Gallimore and Marquise Overton. And the Sooners are looking at the beginning of the 2020 season with just, 33% of last year's sack tally returning to the roster in 2019. So Perkins had 13.5 tackles for loss. Redmond had 11 tackles for loss. And those were second and third to Murray, who had 17, and he was drafted in the first round of the NFL draft last April. So the Sooners are going to lean heavily on Big 12 Defensive Newcomer of the Year, at least in 2019, defensive tackle LaRon Stokes. And now the coaching staff is going to have to trust their recruiting and development in a manner that would make even the most optimistic OU fan a little nervous, right? Redshirt sophomore defensive tackle Jordan Kelly missed every game but the Peach Bowl in 2019. He has played in just 3 games in 3 years. Redshirt junior and defensive tackle Zacchaeus McKinney has played in just 1 game against South Dakota, and in the last 2 years, that's not a lot. Redshirt freshman and defensive tackle Corey Robertson played in 4 games last year before he and the staff decided to take advantage of his available redshirt. In the first week of September, losing defensive lineman Troy James to the transfer portal in January and sophomore Derek Green to transfer after enrolling at OU as a freshman are facts that might prove pivotal, goodness me, in 2020. Still, the Sooners should not have trouble with FCS Missouri State in their season opener. When the Sooners begin conference play against Kansas State on September 26th, depth through the middle of the Sooner defense certainly could become an issue. Without question, the answer to OU's solution of depth is in junior college transfers and defensive tackles Perion Winfrey and Josh Ellison. Both Winfrey and Ellison were ranked among the top 25 JUCO recruits in the country in 2020 and the number 1 and number 2 defensive tackles in the country. The reviews for each of those players through preseason camp were positive, but positivity is only as good as productivity for a defense that is trying to build on a decent showing during defensive coordinator Alex Grinch's first campaign. But if any coach in America can develop undersized and undervalued talent in an upper echelon college football program into a star, it's got to be Grinch, right? At Washington State, he developed defensive tackle Hercules Mataafa from a 3-star outside linebacker who was ranked, I kid you not, 1,691st in the country in the 2014 class into the first consensus All-American at Wazoo in 15 years. All 6'2", 254 pounds of him. So if you can do that and you're Alex Grinch, not only do I think your defense is going to be fine, you probably deserve a raise and you're probably going to be a head coach at this time next year, but you got to get through the first 10 games before we can even begin to talk about this, right? Now, I also understand that there are a number of people that believe that the kiddos like Noah Orenze are going to have a lot to say about this. And they might, but that's because they would have to. right? Because you don't have the depth at defensive line. You're going to have to move Isaiah Thomas over. You're going to have to trust that Marcus Stripling can hold it down until Ronnie Perkins gets back, and then you're going to have to move him to the other side of the ball. Like, you just don't have enough options here. You have dudes, but do you have dudes that play 0 technique, 1 technique, 3 eye? Not a bunch of them. This is why we put such an emphasis on recruiting defensive tackles at places like the Big 12 and in places like the Pac-12 and in places basically where they haven't won national championships in a long time. Because the top defensive tackles usually go to the schools that are winning national championships. And if you want to follow who's going to be playing in the playoff more often than not outside of Oklahoma, you're talking about teams that have the top defensive tackle recruits and the best developed defensive linemen in the country. That's why we're all looking at Alabama and Christian Barmore. That dude can play. That's why we're all looking at Xavier Kelly. That's why we're all looking at Xavier Thomas. That's why we're even looking at Marvin Wilson at Florida State. Because you have to have defensive tackle development, and then you have to have defensive tackle depth to try to recruit and to try to win with the best teams in college football. And since this ain't Missouri State, and this ain't Arkansas State, and this ain't even Memphis, this is Oklahoma, that is the standard. The standard is trying to win national championships. There are basically 5 rings on this finger, on each finger on this hand for Lincoln Riley. But does it really matter to OU fans? Not in the way that you think. Because it's going back 20 years since Oklahoma wore the 1 ring to rule them all. And that's the national title ring. Even then, talk about getting to the national final. A thing that Clemson just kind of does, right? They won it in 2018. They got back there in 2019. They've been there basically since announcing themselves over Oklahoma's dead body in the Sweatpants Bowl, what lay people call the Russell Athletic Bowl. You also can look to an Oregon that was pretty good about 8 years ago. You can look to an Auburn that won a national championship in 2010. You can look to Washington, who managed to get to a semifinal somehow. And I'm still trying to think about why did we let Jake Browning and Washington get there? And then I'm going, yeah, that's Chris Peterson. He can coach. Then there's Ohio State to contend with, but in a year in which you don't have to contend with Oregon or Utah, who furloughed their entire staff, or Ohio State, or, bless them, Michigan, you ought to be in the running. But then again, what are we talking about? We have had college football playoffs without the Pac-12 and the Big Ten represented. And I want to talk about the Big Ten against Ohio State and Michigan. But first, I want to welcome in my best friend, Ron, who I hope is here now. Ron, are you there? Are you? Okay.
Yeah, I'm still here. Thanks for having me.
No. Thank you for really just being here with me to talk about stuff. Defensive tackle recruiting, defensive line recruiting. I feel like I overemphasize it, and then I'll go and look at who the best teams in the country are, and I feel better about myself. Because, if you can play defense, I don't need the offense because the defense can score. See 2001 Miami. Do you have a question that needs to be answered about the defensive tackle recruiting at Oklahoma, or do you have everything you need?
I think that you have everything that you need, because at the very least, when it comes to, say, your interior lineman, like you can't teach, if you're a good recruiter, you can't teach size. So you need to have somebody in there that's big enough to handle the offensive line that is thrown in front of him. Of course you do, but it's so important to letting the rest of your defense be able to take care of the responsibilities, or have your schemes play out as you like. It would be nice to get the Warren Sapps, Dominican Sues, and like the absolute monsters that you have at Clemson right now. But at the very least, you just need to have cats that are willing to show up, do the work, hit the weight room, and to be nasty. And I think Oklahoma has succeeded in that for the most part.
And they're going to have to with this scheme that they run, because I don't think that you and I have had an in-depth conversation about the scheme, but I wanted to bring it to you. It's been called a 3-4, right? You look at it and probably see a 3-3-5, right? I see a 4-2-5, because what they do is have 3 down defensive linemen and 1 stand-up 9, right? And they got two inside dudes in the middle that basically are interchangeable at Mike and Will, and you can call them whatever you want. And they run three safeties, one of which is a slot corner. It looks a lot like what I think Alabama would look like if they did not have 300-pound dudes through the middle that they could absolutely rely on to go 2 to 6 deep. And yet, when I look at this scheme, it says it's built on speed, but what it's built on is weight, right? Because, like, none of these kids weigh more than 295. And 295 is on the heavy side. Like, I think the ideal defensive tackle for Alex Grinch is about 280 and might be 6'3", 6'4". Like, they're skinny and they're supposed to split people. They're not supposed to, like, take on blocks. And they're certainly not supposed to get in too many 2-on-1s. They're just supposed to go through the middle of them. But what I see when you try to put that defense against, you know, a team with some offensive linemen and a decent tailback is they get blown up. And I'm still waiting to see how this scheme works against teams that don't run, you know, like power spread, because against LSU it was non-existent, but against Texas they had 9 sacks. So, like, it feels like we're talking about the inverted pyramid, this book about soccer that I really love, in scheme and scheme fit. But the defense is supposed to complement the offense in that it plays fast enough to get the ball back to the offense, but not so fast as to keep the offense on the field that is, you know, absolutely going fast. So what do you think about the offensive-defensive philosophy there?
Well, I mean, you would love to be able to have a team that can conquer all seasons, but you can't play for the first game of the playoffs. You can't play for the national championship. You got to play for the people that are showing up on your schedule one after the other. So yeah, it works against Texas. Yeah, it works against the other teams that run like a power spread. And of course, it fails against LSU, the LSU's of the world, because you're not prepared for that. You haven't thrown your eggs in that basket. So they're doing what they have to do to be able to gamble at the end.
That's interesting because, like, if you're going to gamble on the offense, you feel good about Oklahoma's offense almost better than you feel about any other offense. But also, this defense is supposed to be built on this idea of takeaways being supreme. Takeaways and tackles for loss. They weren't very good at either one of those things last year. And granted, it's the first year, but, like, building your defense around ginger pressing, I find to be interesting because it means that you got to take chances. It means that you can't stay in your base coverages. It means you got to blitz people, right? It means you got to trick people into seeing stuff that are in there with stunts and twists. And I'm going, yo, man, you're going to give up 692 yards. You keep doing that, and they did against LSU. But when it worked against Texas, we focus on the 9 sacks. We don't focus on the 27 points they gave up, even as they gave up an average of 27 points. But most of the low-scoring games they had were against really bad football teams like South Dakota or UCLA, right? I mean, I want to see how this defense works when it's going well, but it's also a question of recruiting to me because the dudes that Grinch wants, stop me if you heard this one before, 6'4" defensive back. 6'4" defensive back with speed. 6'4" defensive back that can run, as in play cover 3, cover 4. Is that not a unicorn? Because I always thought that was a unicorn. I thought those dudes played wide receiver. And yet he's got a few dudes on the roster that fit that. I'm just saying, like, recruiting around that philosophy seems to be difficult.
Yeah, like, I guess if you're looking for an ACC point guard, I guess you got to go look in that direction and convince him not to play Duke.
Oh, wait, but I wish it wasn't that clear-cut a metaphor, but it is. It's like, man, wouldn't it be great if we all had R.J. Barrett's? I mean, yeah. But show me where those dudes are. And then you're talking about building the defense around your best players. Like, one of the things that he did well was put Kenneth Murray Jr. in positions to be Kenneth Murray Jr. because the dude still couldn't see and pick out what he was seeing. They just gave him a trigger. And they said, when you see this, go. And he would see it and he would go. And sometimes, you know, good teams will use it against him, but the only team that successfully used it against him, like, for an entire game was Kansas State. And Kansas State was, I think I told you the story about them pulling, like, they ran a fake guard pull power into an ISO.
Yes, I remember.
Okay. And I just don't see any more of those that are going to be out there for them. So, yeah. I want to see what this defense looks like. I just am not enthusiastic about seeing it against Missouri State. Like, all right, here's one. Oklahoma is a 40.5-point favorite against Missouri State. I don't think that's enough. I think OU covers and then some. Do you think they cover and then some?
I'm not a gambler, man. So my grandfather told me not to go down those vices. But yeah, I'd say they probably cover and then some.
Well, I asked that question because of the COVID, right? Because like,
I'm glad you said it.
well, but it's true. Like, all right, if you in this age of nobody got any reps, because that's what I'm gonna call 2020 up until September. Nobody got any reps. You're gonna have to get all your reps in live games, which is to say that like normally we would see Oklahoma pull it off maybe start of the third quarter after the first series. Now they might play the entire third just so they can get all these ones, the reps that they weren't able to get in spring, weren't able to get in summer. They even had to cut out some of their preseason practices either for COVID reasons or for, Black Lives Matter reasons. And I looked around and I said, man, everybody's had to do this. So that's interesting. And then you got a Missouri State squad that they know what it is. They're going to make $650,000 to play this game. So they're going to play this game. But I'm not going to begrudge them if they don't give it their all, or if they look at some of these dudes and be like, nah, man, I don't want that ball. You can have it.
Well, like Missouri State's in the, like you talk about the unreliable offseason that OU has had. Missouri State's in the exact same position, but now they're working with less talent than Oklahoma is. So the game could be close, and I wouldn't say that would be out of the something that is widely unexpected, or it could be they get blown out by 60. Both of those are on the table.
Yeah, and I could just as easily see this being 70-0, and that being a light day at the office for Spencer Rattler in his debut. I don't really want to. Go ahead.
I say I don't. It's not even that. Say 70-0 is like okay, it was kind of a walk in the park. But I can also see it being a 23-0 slog.
Ooh, describe to me how that looks.
Oh, it's just a whole bunch of rust not being like of maybe Missouri being slightly better in a handful of positions and a handful of miscommunications for an offense that hasn't had a full offseason. I mean, it's like you said, hey man, COVID's messing up everything.
Yeah, it's made for some sloppy football, if brilliant football. And I kind of want to recap the weekend in this segment because, all right, so I had to style on one dude on the Twitters, and you would have said, RJ, let this man have his shine, but I could not see it. So a Middle Tennessee player tweeted a couple photos of him leaping over the top of an Army player, talking about, how good he felt. And then he was quickly pointed out to him, yo, man, you fumbled on this play. And then I had to come over the top, be like, y'all lost 42-0. Maybe don't put yourself out here as a piñata, because we all watched that game. You went up to Mikey, and y'all got beat down. Like, the starting quarterback, Astro O'Hara, they compared him to Jalen. I say they. Ross Tucker compared him to Jalen Hurts, and I'm not a Jalen stan. And yet, he's out here talking about, yeah, he was like Jalen Hurts last year because he threw for 2,600 and rushed for 1,000. I'm like, first of all, 3,800 and 1,300 does not make, yeah. Second of all, the 19th person since 1996. It's like saying you're the 19th person to start a YouTube channel since 1996, I guess, in sports. Like, it's not really that much to be excited about. And yet, Ross Tucker was trying to gas this kid up. Anyway, Army rushes 62 times for over 300 yards because that's what Army does. And I'm ready to crown Army as the 2020 national champs. They get a tough game against BYU, but that's at Mikey Stadium, and BYU is going to be barnstorming anyway. I don't expect them to be any good. Then there's Marshall beating the hell out of Eastern Kentucky, but that's FCS versus FBS. And Eastern Kentucky had a new head coach. And then I looked around and said, who else lost? Okay, Southern Miss lost with a good quarterback at Jack Abraham to South Alabama, but they got two new coordinators. Aside, Southern Miss tried to hire Art Briles to be their offensive coordinator last year. Did you see this?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we need to talk about why that's a bad decision?
I feel like you got something brewing up. Why is that?
No, I just, in our recent conversations, and stuff we just talked about, one of the things that I've been trying to think about is what is it that I take for granted that people know? or understand. So I'm just thinking, do we need to address why Art Briles should not have a job in college football ever?
That's not any heat that I want to take on at the moment.
Okay.
But
moving on.
But I want you to know I'm right there with you. Whatever you're about to say, I agree.
Okay. Then we will leave it there. And then there was Arkansas State and Memphis, which was fun, but it was fun because Memphis's defense is bad and their offense is good. Like, they put up over 500 yards, and I barely noticed. And they might be, the American champs, but it's real interesting if they make the college football playoff. And then my favorite story from the weekend, the Big Ten. Because the Big Ten has decided that it wants to be like a boat in the ocean that just, sinks. Can't really say why, except maybe that it needed to sink. Because the Big Ten is self-owning in a way that I thought was impossible to start 2020. But so many things have proven to be possible in 2020. We got open records revealing that Nebraska's chancellor had emailed Kevin Warren, who's the Big Ten commissioner, on July 30th to be like, yo, in this call that we had among the university presidents of the 14 of us, I didn't like the way that it went. So I'm going to send you this note going, yo, we want to play football and we're going to lose $120 million. And we would really love to have a plan in place if, y'all are thinking that you want to do the cancellation thing. Next day, Kevin Warren cancels, didn't tell anybody. But apparently he took his direction from a vote that they held, which is to say they gave him the authority to make a decision on playing football or not playing football. So he made that decision. All right. Over the next month, we've gotten Ohio State parents flying to Rosemont, Illinois to protest outside the Big Ten office. We got Iowa and Nebraska parents sending letters to the Big Ten going, reverse the decision. We have Ohio State players who are quite literally distraught. We've had the NCAA come down with a rule that says not only are we going to extend the deadline, well, I should say this is a proposed rule. They haven't enacted it yet, but still the same. It's the Division I Council for Football. They're probably going to enact it. Mm-hmm. We're going to extend the dead period to October 31st, which means that the only ways that coaches can have contact with recruits is via written messages, email, text, Twitter, or phone calls, FaceTime, yada. And to add to that, we're also going to prevent any early enrollee from playing football if there's a spring season. So in that way, you're already saying to the kids that they have committed, hey, we don't care if you are skipping your senior seasons because we might think it's safe to play football in January. We're still not going to let you. And on top of that, this year of eligibility that everybody was granted, if you play fall competition at all, you can't play spring competition, which is to say like Central Arkansas. It's going to play 9-game schedule this year. And they already said we're just not going to play in the spring. But if they wanted to, now they can't. And what are you going to do with North Dakota State, who's going to have their showcase game on October 3rd? That's that one game. And you're going to tell us that the defending national champs and the most well-known FCS program in college football is not going to be allowed to play football in the spring because they played one game in the fall in their home stadium. What do you do with this information? What do you do with this if you're getting it from all directions except run and hide?
All I see is that you're making enemies. I'm trying to discern as I'm going through all the information. Where's the win? What is all this benefit to? Especially whenever you're throwing stuff like early enrollees can't play, and if you play in the fall, you can't play in the spring. Who wins in that scenario? Who are we trying to protect? What's the? I'm at a loss.
The only people that seem to be winning in this are the people that have chosen to play football.
Mm.
That's how this feels. It feels like you're penalizing the people who took what I think is the same decision to not play football. And you're just doubling down on that. And you're reinforcing some really bad habits by saying hey, we know that you're losing hundreds of millions of dollars. We know that we have no way of helping you recoup that money. And we know that we're going to prevent you from trying to do anything possible to recoup that money in light of data that might change, new facts, as they say, that you might be given, all these other things that might lead you to some rationalization despite what you might think of playing football.
And then they throw a restrictor plate on top of that.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
The NCAA is a maid service, man. Y'all need to fire the maid. Fire the maid. That's speaking purely from a business standpoint. You're preventing me from doing my job. And I don't actually need you to do my job. That means that I no longer need you. Meanwhile, we got, most of the Big Ten looking at the NCAA saying, I guess that's what it is. And yet we have mass hysteria everywhere else. And university presidents coming out being like, yeah, I told Kevin Warren not to do that. And it's like we got 2 sworn affidavits that said you did tell him to do that. So you're lying. Not he's lying. You're lying.
So many people are trying to protect themselves because it's like, I don't remember there being a vote. And someone's like, yeah, here's an email saying that we had a vote. Interesting.
I would not be surprised if Kevin Warren just kind of walks out on the Big Ten Network saying, okay, here's my little black book of receipts. Fight me. Because that's what I would do at this point. You're not just, like, when he got styled on by the Rutgers president, talking about, I told him we wanted to play football. You in New Jersey. It's unlawful for you to play football. And you're Rutgers. You're Rutgers. You take $40 million. You don't get it. You don't earn it. Like, we let you be in this league. And I gotta take noise from you? Nah, man. I gotta show up at the Rutgers president's office in a hazmat suit going, we got a squad. Put on your suit. I can't let you do this to me. I'm sorry. My feelings, my pride are worth more than this job. Let's go. All right, so then on top of all of this, Jim Harbaugh being peak Jim Harbaugh. Okay. On the same day we get 6 games college football, Jim Harbaugh joins the parents and fans outside the big house to march around. And so marching around, he's got his daughter's hand. They got on mask. He's asked by a Detroit Free Press, reporter, have you had any conversations with President Mark Schlissel about, playing football? He's like, no. We exchanged some texts. Ward does all of that. Ward Manuel is the athletic director at Michigan. But I haven't heard anything. I want to play football. They're preventing us from playing football. And then he invoked stuff like freedom. And I'm like, okay, Doc, you making $7.5 million to lay in the cut, and you out here calling out the president of the University of Michigan. That's a good way to lose your job. Like the president of Michigan, University of Michigan, he might actually lose his job, but he might fire you first. So, like, if you're Jim Harbaugh, where's the win here? Who are you trying to win over? Is it future recruits that aren't going to be able to play? Is it the players that going to do what you tell them anyway because they don't have any agency whatsoever? Or is it a fan base that is so fickle because you ain't beat Ohio State? So, like, why is Jim Harbaugh sticking his neck out against the Big Ten and the NCAA?
I know he's probably read the tea leaves. He's not the dumbest man on the earth. So I'd say that he knows that if he doesn't win, he's out of there anyway. He knows that if he probably doesn't have a great working relationship with the president, and so now he just has an opportunity to be free. He's the best type of lame duck. In the best case scenarios, they do play. Michigan is good. They finally beat Ohio State, and hooray, underdog story. He gets to keep his job. Otherwise, if he loses his job, he's it's the fraternity of coaches. He's gonna have have a high profile interview or offer 7 minutes after he leaves office
in the NFL.
In the NFL.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I had a really great conversation on the podcast that y'all can go download and listen to with Martin Warren about Jim Harbaugh, kind of sort of changing my opinion about Harbaugh. And plus, his son, Darian Green Warren, is one of my favorite kiddos in the true freshman class. But one of the things that Michigan did not have that would have probably made it difficult for them to win some games is a returning starting quarterback. They were down to Dylan McCaffrey and Joe Milton before they got the axe, which is my segue into how many teams have returning starting quarterbacks, and then how many teams have returning starting quarterbacks with the same play callers and or head coaches. Because the way that we take a look at those players and those teams needs to change in the age of the COVID. Because Todd Monken said something I thought was wild interesting. As he is the new offensive coordinator for the University of Georgia, and up until last week, he was overseeing a QB derby between JT Daniels, former five-star out of Mater Dei, transfer from USC, and Jamie Newman, whom I nicknamed store brand Cam Newton, who transferred from Wake Forest. Now, store brand Cam Newton was brought to Georgia by James Coley. James Coley was co-OC at UGA. He got fired. He's Texas A&M tight end coach now, so the one tie that store brand might have had to Georgia is at ampersand U. Then you bring in Todd Monken, who turned Wes Lunt and Oklahoma State into 550 yards a game, and who has proven that if you give him tailbacks, he can run them too. It's a good hire for a dude that is, even by coaching standards, a nomad. We're talking about Oklahoma State in like 2011, head coach Southern Miss, where they went over. Offensive coordinator at Cleveland, offensive coordinator with the Bucks, to end up offensive coordinator at UGA. Whoever his realtor is making some money. Now, in this particular season, he has a new offensive line coach that joined him, and Matt Luke, who got fired after, I think it's Elijah Hood raised his leg and faked acting like a dog taking a piss on the logo during the Egg Bowl. You lose 4 starters on the offensive line at Georgia. You don't have Dominic Blaylock coming back, so you're begging Kyrus Jackson and Demetrius Robertson to be good next to George Pickens. You have James Cook and Zamir White, who I think are great tailbacks, and you got a bevy of tailbacks back there. And now you're down to JT Daniels, who has not yet been cleared to play tackle football. Stetson Bennett, who gets to wear a UGA jersey, and that's good for him. Carson Beck, who's a true freshman, and Dwan Mathis, who had brain surgery last year and been cleared to play football. Now, Dwan Mathis provides the same sort of threat that store brand Cam Newton did, which is to say that JT Daniels does not. That said, you're installing a new offense, a new scheme at the University of Georgia. And then Todd Monken said this: it's hard because it was only basically 5 days ago as coaches we've been on the field with them throwing a football. Said that last week. I know it's hard to envision when you really think about it that the coaches have not been on the field with our players throwing a football until we started camp without having spring ball. Everything else is on your own when you have a football on the field. So it made it a little bit difficult. Ron, can you imagine having to install your offense with a quarterback that you can't talk to while he throws footballs in basically 3 weeks?
Oh, the offense that I would have to put in there would have to be so simple. You would be playing football math at that point, especially if you're just trying to talk over the phone or through Zoom. Especially whenever you don't have, you know that he can't throw at his guys. You can't throw any looks at him. I can't imagine. I mean, I could, but whatever I would put on the field wouldn't be very good.
Yeah, because, I was all ready for Georgia to contend for a national championship. And then it did dawn on me how little time these coaches have had. And then that leads me to other guys that, are new that haven't had that much time. Mike Yurcich at Texas inherits a quarterback that's still there, but, they're putting in a new system. And they're still getting into the rhythm of the play calling. Dave Aranda at Baylor has Larry Fedora as the offensive coordinator, but, they get Charlie Brewer back, but I don't expect them to be any good. I feel kind of decent now about Texas Tech because they got the same offensive coordinator, the same head coach, and a dude that has started football games for them before blowing up his shoulder. Iowa State is in the same boat there with Brock Purdy and Matt Campbell, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But then I look at, the SEC West, which I feel like is a really cool topic for you and I both. Because you got Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. You got Mike Leach at Mississippi State. We know all about Edo. Jimbo Fisher at ampersand U. Gus Malzahn at Auburn. And, of course, Nick Saban at Alabama. Nick Saban returns not just the starting quarterback that finished the season with him and Mac Jones, but gave Steve Sarkisian, the offensive coordinator, a raise to $2.1 million, which makes him higher paid than all but like 10 FBS head coaches. Now add to that, Jimbo Fisher returns his quarterback and, of course, is the head coach play caller. Gus Malzahn apparently gave the play calling privileges to Chad Morris. I'll be interested to see if they stay in Chad Morris's hands. And they get their quarterback back. But KJ Costello running air raid is interesting for Mike Leach because Mike Leach is, Mike Leach, but also because KJ Costello is built like a pro-style quarterback, which is to be big, strong, and white. So I'm interested to see how this goes. And then you got Ole Miss with Jeff Lebby, who was the offensive coordinator at Central Florida last year, and they were good. And, of course, Lane Kiffin, who I gotta believe is going to be the play caller, but we'll see how that goes. And they have a really, really, really scary decision because they haven't had any time with John Rice Plumlee, and they haven't had any time with Matt Corral, and they're two different quarterbacks. Because John Rice Plumlee is a home run hitter. He is the rare white quarterback with wheels who can't throw, right? It's almost like looking at Joe Webb.
Okay.
John Rice Plumlee also played baseball, not just at Ole Miss, but in Hattiesburg, which I did not know because he's from Hattiesburg. And he joined up with Jaron Ely, who's going to be a great tailback for them and was good last year. And then there's Matt Corral, who can throw the ball, can't run. So what would you want to do in this position? Well, normally, Lane Kiffin would want to pick a quarterback because to let him tell it, and this is my favorite quote that he gave. Yo, I tried to run 2 quarterbacks at USC once. I got fired. So I don't think I'm going to do that this time. And yet, I don't know which one I'm going to pick because, they're 2 different style of players, which means I got to build 2 different offenses using the same terminology. And we saw the 2 quarterback system, which is the no quarterback system, with Arkansas State, and they got beat down soundly by Memphis, and I hate 2 quarterback systems. Pick a dude, ride or die with him, because he's not going to get any better if you give him the hook, and the guy that you put in there knows that you don't believe him in the first place. So laying this out, just knowing what you know about Lane Kiffin, knowing what you know about quarterback play, do you start one or the other? And if you do, which one?
Oh, I would say that you would put the person out in there that is the best thrower. Who was that again? The one that
Matt Corral. Matt Corral.
So you put him back there because you need somebody that can operate your offense under like optimum conditions, right? So assuming that everybody holds their block and everybody runs their routes, you need to have somebody that can deliver it. And if a play breaks down, you're just gonna have to roll with it as you game plan further into the game. That's who's the best pure quarterback is who I'm throwing back there, especially if I have a whole bunch of unknowns and an offseason that has a little bit of turmoil into it.
I'm with you because I need my quarterback to be accurate when he throws the ball.
Like I don't necessarily need that. I can have somebody that's inaccurate. I can have somebody that can play some jazz. But I don't think this is the season to try that out.
Ah, okay. So the symptoms around the season have led you to believe that perhaps you could die. Or it could be asymptomatic and you're not willing to take that risk.
Yeah, you could put it like that. Okay. I think that anybody that has the sharpest whoever has the sharpest offense going into the season is going to have the best chance of winning the conference.
I mean,
that's it.
Hey man, it's all about rapidly testing. Before you go and throw that quarterback out there, you have to know whether or not that's going to be a positive or a negative for you. Still read. Getting married this year? Organizing a corporate function that needs all the trimmings? Who is Mike Jones Event Planning? Who? Mike Jones. Who? Mike Jones. Who is Mike Jones Event Planning is your premier coordinating and concierge firm. Who is Mike Jones Event Planning coordinates and caters events of all sizes, specializing in graduation parties, theme weddings, bar mitzvahs, quinceañeras, and Kwanzaa. Who is Mike Jones Event Planning wants to make sure that your event goes off without a hitch, and that means chopped and screwed planning ahead now. So put them H-Town Hutsies on Front Street. Remember, Back then, they didn't want you. Now you hot. They all on you. To make all your dreams come true, call Who is Mike Jones Event Planning at 281-330-8004. So I want to go back to these conversations about quarterbacks and coordinators and head coaches staying intact. And I'm going to give you a list of that combination that I think is really good. And I'm going to point out some positives and some negatives. And we'll see if you kind of sort of disagree. So, first one is Florida. Kyle Trask comes back to play starting quarterback for Dan Mullen's Florida Gators. And each year Dan Mullen has been head coach, they've won 10 games. They've been good. They've also had a decent defense, even as Todd Grantham's motto seems to be blitz every single down. Every single down. Blitz somebody. Run the grits blitz about 7 times a game. He also was able to recruit really friggin' well. Like, they're good defensively. And then offensively, you got Kyle Pitts at tight end, who might win the Mackey Award even in a regular year. And I mentioned Kyle Trask, but it bears saying. Kyle Trask was not the one for Florida, though he did challenge for the one at Florida. And many people would tell you that was closer than you thought. Then Felipe Franks goes out there, dislocates his ankle, ends up in the portal, and is out at Arkansas. Talk about that in a little bit. But it's also because behind Kyle Trask is Emory Jones. And Emory Jones got enough playing time that Dan Mullins feels good with either one of his quarterbacks. So in this year, where we talked about the symptoms and we talk about how certain death is on the table, it feels like the safe choice to pick to come out of the SEC East to represent in the SEC championship game is probably Florida. If for no other reason than they have everybody returning in a year in which nobody got any reps. I say everybody. They have a lot of people returning in which nobody got any reps. And the team that they can't get over the top of, right, that beat them 3 years in a row, is Georgia. And for the first time in those 3 years, Georgia has some instability at quarterback. Now, the SEC East also has in it Kentucky. I guess we can include the Built, the Vanderbilt. They're rich, and that's about all we can say about them. Tennessee, Jeremy Pruitt, they had 44 players that were out in quarantine or COVID positive because, they can't actually enforce that bubble. But maybe they're decent. Maybe they're okay. And then my favorite team in there that we don't talk about, right, is not Missouri, though we will. It's Kentucky. Why? Because whenever somebody tells me that Iowa State is good, I remind them Iowa State won 7 games last year, lost 6. And they're like, yes, but Iowa State could be 2020's 2019 Baylor. To which I say, yo, man, Iowa State put together the best passing season in school history last year and scored 400 points for the first time since 2002 last year. Kentucky not only lost their starting quarterback, they got so deep at quarterback, or so shallow at quarterback, I should say, that they moved starting wide receiver, who was drafted in the NFL at tailback, to play quarterback for half the season, and they won 8 games. So when that team can win 8 games and you're telling me Iowa State, who won 7, has their best season, this is the difference between the SEC and the Big 12. And it's why it's really difficult to ride for this podunk conference. And obviously, they returned somebody. They returned a coordinator as well. They returned Terry Wilson out of Dell City. Stand up. But are you buying the hype that Florida comes out of the SEC East, even knowing what you know about historically how good Georgia has been in the 4 years that Kirby Smart has been running Georgia?
I do. I think they have a great chance of winning the SEC East. I think the only person in their way, like you say, Kentucky is there, and I agree with you. I'd say that if anybody's going to talk about if you're going to have to choose between a second roadblock between Tennessee and Kentucky, it's absolutely going to be Kentucky. That, if they can make it past Kentucky, I think they have a great shot of beating Georgia. But I definitely have to see how Georgia performs at the quarterback. Like, I'd love to see them actually work, because they have the talent to beat Florida again. But if they can't put it together, they can't put any points on the board because they don't have, an engine for their offense. Yeah, Florida's a great pick. Like it's, I'm not gonna say far and away. I don't think you could go wrong picking Florida to win the East.
I'm gonna pick Georgia anyway, cause
No, that's good.
yeah, no,
Good.
yeah, I'm sad to say, I'm gonna pick Georgia anyway. I just Richard LeCount. I mean, Zamir White. If they just want to ride Zamir White, I'm gonna be happy with that. I trust Dan Lanning and Kirby Smart to figure it out on defense. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and pick Georgia. All right, another one of these with everybody intact that I feel really good about is North Carolina. Mac Brown going into year 2. Sam Howell had the best true freshman quarterback season that we've seen in the modern era. Set an ACC record for touchdowns with 38 in his first season, over 3,900 yards passing. And they have 2 coordinators that I absolutely adore and are very, very good, Jay Bateman and Phil Longo. Jay Bateman came onto my radar when he forced Kyler Murray in Oklahoma into double overtime at Owen Field as defense coordinator at Army. Okay, give him some Power 5 talent and watch him go. And he has that now. And apparently, a couple of those dudes are absolute monsters. And one in particular, right? Because, I mean, there's Desmond, who's playing defensive end. Everybody knew what he's going to be in 2020. But they also got Tony Grimes, who was the number 1 cornerback in the 2021 class, who just decided, oh, Virginia's not going to let me play high school football? Let me reclassify and take my behind down to Chapel Hill, which is such a flex. Because he did that in July. He said in July, I'm going to reclassify, and showed up in August, like, let's play football. Such a flex. And then you got Phil Longo, who got the job with Mac Brown as offensive coordinator after being the offensive coordinator at Ole Miss. Why? Because Mac Brown went up to what he thought was the smartest offensive dude in football in Lincoln Riley and said, who do you like? Who would you hire to run your offense? And Riley said, Longo, but I don't think you can get him. And Mac's like, I'm sorry, son. I've been recruiting for 40 years. What'd you just say? I can't what? Bet. So now you got Jay Bateman, Phil Longo coaching the Tar Heels, returning with Sam Howell, who is, I think, good money, like the value bet for Heisman Trophy candidate. Because last year, North Carolina is down 21-20 against Clemson. And they went for it on 2-point conversion play. They failed on a speed option. They lose 21-20. It's the closest anybody played Clemson all last year. And that was, remember, juggernaut Clemson. That was before Clemson took the L to LSU. And even then, national runner-up. I really, really, really like North Carolina this year. And they get to beat down Notre Dame. And I got to check their schedule because I'm so messed up with what the schedules are. But I want to say they get to dodge Clemson. But while I'm looking that up, how do you feel about my argument for North Carolina being good?
I'm not ready to shift the crown away from Clemson. I think Clemson has in all of our text conversations about, did you see who they picked up? Do you see who they retained? Do you see how the rules have helped them? I don't see how you pick against them. Like, even if you want to say, like, even if you were a Notre Dame stan.
No Clemson on their schedule this year. But yes, to your point. So they would see them in an ACC championship game. So, I mean, they don't get to dodge them. I'm just...
okay.
Yeah.
Then I think you're on course. I'm not the biggest ACC stan out there, so I don't have much to give to you other than who shows up on the national TV every day or every weekend.
Yeah, and that's what's wild, right? Because I think I miss North Carolina being good because I was watching so much Florida State and Miami football in the late 90s into the 2000s. But every time I try to say that Dre Bly might be the best North Carolina football player of all time, people are like, yo, man, LT went to North Carolina. And I'm like, he did, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then it's like, Julius Peppers went to North Carolina. He did, didn't he? Julius Peppers and Dre Bly both played for Mac Brown. And they were right there with 9, 10, 11 wins right before he took the job at Texas. So, like, I'm not used to talking about North Carolina in a really great way because, like, since then, it was that 1 year with Larry Fedora, and that was it, right? Like, it's a basketball school. It's always going to be a basketball school. Like, Mac Brown can make $6 million. Roy Williams will make 6.1, just so everybody knows what it is at UNC. But I'm with you on the Clemson thing because what Clemson has done, I don't think we'll be able to put it into context for some time because it's such a small school and doesn't really have tradition like that. It's not even the dominant program in that state, over the last 150 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really about one man. It's about one man who had no other head coaching experience and no other head coaching job. And as much as I want to bet against that, it's like betting against OU in the Big 12 to win the Big 12 championship. You're just like, nah, I like my money. More than that, if they do lose, nobody's going to give me credit for it. And if they win, I look like a fool. So, yeah, I get it. I understand. Another one of those things that I wanted to point out that I thought not enough people were actually given thought to is just how much the national media likes Iowa State. Because I mentioned them a little bit in an earlier segment. I can talk myself out of Iowa State if they know that they have pressure. Because despite them playing OU well the last 3 years, you take losses to Oklahoma State in a squirrely game. You can still get beat by Texas Tech. You can still get beat by Baylor. Like, there are just teams that you should be able to beat down before you beat Oklahoma, before I can tell anybody that you're good. And that said, they got a preseason All-American, a tight end in Charlie Kolar, and they run this defense that is just so annoying. All right, Ron, you're going to run 3 defensive linemen, and you're going to drop 8. I should be able to tear you up. I should be able to run at you, and I should be able to pick your zone apart. But because every last one of them boys can come downhill and tackle, and have also felt like they've been at Iowa State for 9 years, they're just hard to beat. Like, they make you move the football. And in that way, it's like, I'm more talented than you. And they're like, yeah, but we're more disciplined. All we got to do is get you down on the ground. And they get you down on the ground. And that's what really stops me from saying that Iowa State is not going to be anywhere near the Big 12 championship game. But if their defense actually elevates, they get to be more than annoying. They get to be the kind of defense that puts the clamps on people. Now, I'm not asking you to go and watch the Iowa State film. I'm not even asking you to tell me that Iowa State's going to be good. I am asking you, can you win a Big 12 championship? Can you win a Big 12 championship and make the playoff running a bend but don't break defense that is built on lunch pail white kids?
Yeah, you can definitely make it to a playoff with that. K-State has proven that every fourth year or so.
That's right.
I'd say that for me, this is a big fun conversation about when we shift from bench racing the top teams in whatever conference against each other, like the first round of the playoffs. But like I said earlier, you have to play to get there. So Iowa State is running a team that's built to beat OU. That's the goal, right? They seem to have a lot of things going for them to be able to sustain some of the goodness that they got last season. But what they're putting on the field is just trying to turn that 41-42 into a 42-41, and from there we can go and I guess we can go look at Texas, but then we can go start for the Big 12 championship, and then maybe first round of the playoffs. Iowa State could do that, but anything past that, we're just seeing if this experiment plays off against essentially one team.
Okay. I want to do another segment about New England Patriots and Cam Newton and a little bit about the NFL and what we expect from them, not just from the COVID, but also give me an opportunity to gloat about, my fantasy football team, because I feel real good about my fantasy football team, and this is my show. But first, we're going to do a read. Yeah. Does your business need to rank higher in the search engines? Do you want everything your company touches to turn to gold? If you answered yes, and if you didn't, you a sucker, to either of those questions, you and your business need to get your act together. At the Pippin Ain't Easy Marketing Conference, attend keynote speeches, made by marketing gurus like Bishop Don Juan and a pimp named Slickback. Got to say the whole word. Got to say it all. A pimp named Slickback. Participate in workshops and learn more about your target market and how you can get their attention in our high-tech world from such renowned professionals like Craig's girlfriend Joy's sister-in-law's baby cousin Tracy. This event is not free, and neither are your meals. So if you're a broke booty Buster Brown, this might not be your get down. Only real get money hustlers need apply at the Pimpin' Ain't Easy marketingconference.com. As always, I am wildly just thankful, grateful that the folks at A Pimpin' Ain't Easy Marketing partner with the RJ Young Show. All right, so this might be about the NFL, but it's not really about the NFL. It's about Cam Newton. All right, Cam Newton had a really cool thing to say on the radio in New England that I thought was not only worth everyone's time, but had your boy kind of fired up. Had your boy feeling kind of like Vegeta. Had your boy ready to put on to go to work on Labor Day, which I would ordinarily like to say is, a normal thing, and it is. But in the way that I read Cam Newton being peak Cam Newton, I felt good because now we got receipts to show. So Cam Newton goes to New England in what everybody thought was going to be washed. All right? Washed. Super washed. And there was this real conversation being had not just nationally, but locally in Boston Sports Talk Radio, because I listened to it, about Jared friggin' Stidham being the starting quarterback for Bill Belichick's New England Patriots post Tom Brady. There was this real conversation that was being had about Brian friggin' Hoyer being the New England Patriots starting quarterback with Cam Newton on the roster. How did y'all forget that Cam Newton is one of the most accomplished quarterbacks in the history of the game, and that no offense has been more predicated on one man's talent than Cam Newton, both in college and in the NFL? Because it ain't like Ron Rivera put dudes around. He had Steve Smith. That's who he had. He had Steve Smith. He took them to a Super Bowl and won the 2015 MVP award. College football here. Auburn. Decent enough. Gene Chizik didn't do nothing but hand the reins over to your man's Gus Malzahn, but whatever. They got Cam Newton out of blend because some laptops went missing in Florida. All right, cool. He shows up, and they ride number 2 all the way to number 1. And I swear to you, I can remember just one dude on that offense with him, and his tailback. It's Michael Dyer. All right. So you got the Heisman, you got the national championship, you got the MVP, trying to get a Super Bowl. You get match made with Emperor Palpatine. By Emperor Palpatine. That's what people are forgetting about this. Bill Belichick wanted Cam Newton. You think that he signed You think Bill Belichick signed Cam Newton not to start him? Is that what you think? They let go Mohamed Sanu. They kept Cam Newton. They watched Gronk go reunite with Tom Brady with the Bucs, which I'll get to. And what do they got? They got Julian Edelman as the lone white dude left over there that's going to be catching passes on a regular basis. You got N'Keal Harry, who was the first wide receiver that the Patriots took in the first round in the Belichick era, coming out of Arizona State last year. He was hurt most of the year. I want him to be good this year. And then you got a New England team that elected 8 captains, one of which is the dude that just got there this summer, Cam Newton, who was also named the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots in a town that is historically got its problems with race. So he goes on the Greg Hill show at WEEI, and he was asked about how the match was made and what he thought. And after him and Hahn about, I had the same questions everybody else did, is Belichick going to let me be me? Am I going to get along with Belichick? I went in with an open mind and looking to learn, and it's turned out to be great. And he's had nothing but good things to say about Carolina, even after they let him go. Because only the Carolina Panthers would release a former NFL MVP quarterback for nothing, which is stupid on its face. But you know what, Matt Rule? Go do you, dog. And then he was asked Hey, look. What do you think is the thing about you that has everybody kind of in their feelings? And this is the quote that Cam Newton gave. We're going to be honest. It is because I am a black athlete, a quarterback, that for a long time I've been unapologetic, carried myself in a way that the media hasn't gave me my just due. But yet at the same time, I do understand that, and I don't have no type of resentment toward that. I embrace who I am. I embrace the moment. I live in the moment. One of the quotes I live by is Carpe Diem. Through it all, I've been able to see an opportunity. I went down a list of things I expect from Bill Belichick, just like Bill Belichick wants a list of things he wants out of Cam Newton. I think the narrative coming here was kind of stereotypical, and to an unjust eye, we heard this about Cam. We heard that. He's a prima donna. He's this and that. But when you really put a microscope to who I really am, there's a lot of favoritism that has not been favorable for my benefit. All right. I'm charged up. I'm charged up not just because Cam Newton said it, but because he said it on local sports talk radio in Boston. And he said it where a lot of people could hear it and where a lot of people like myself were going to talk about it, and said, hey, look, this is who I am. Can you get past what you think and what you don't understand to see the kind of ball player I am? Because if you do, we might be able to make some magic out here. Because I know what you can do, and you know what I can do. What if we did it together? Which I think is a conversation in how race would go in the Disney way, but how it doesn't really go in real life. All right, so like not a whole lot of NFL in there, but like Ron, takes on Cam Newton being Cam Newton, if at all.
Oh, like I want to make so many jokes about the history of Boston and embracing, being unapologetically black in a city like that, the history like that. I'm glad that he's happy to be the person that he is going forward and willing to show that the way that he feels that he was tokenized earlier is not something that he's no longer going to accept, and he's going to succeed despite his past. All of this sounds like I'm trying to sell you a reality TV show, but yeah, if he's charged up, I'm charged up.
It's the
because I don't think he's wrong.
No, it's the NFL. I mean, it is a reality TV show when it's done right. I mean, people make fun of The Bachelorette and The Bachelor all the time. The two of the highest rated TV shows on television. And every year, if you look at the top 100 broadcasts on television, the NFL is like 80 of them. So like, nah, make it a reality TV show. And depending on how the season goes, yeah, I'm going to be watching a lot of New England Patriots football in a way that I never watched New England Patriots football. Even with, as they say, the GOAT at quarterback. All right, so Ron, has anybody like really seen the Bucs depth chart? Because, my God. All right, let me go through this because I feel like I'm just going to say name and you're going to be like, I know that guy, I know that guy, I know that guy. All right, so you got Tom Brady at QB. You got Ronald Jones II, who's going to start at tailback, but behind him, LaShawn McCoy and Leonard Fournette, and then Keyshawn Vaughn. Keyshawn Vaughn went for like 246 on Baylor in 2018 at Vanderbilt and was pretty damn good last year as a tailback too. So they go 4 deep at tailback. Mike Evans at wideout, Chris Godwin at wideout, and then Scotty Miller's going to start. You got John Franklin on IR back there. Yes, he of Last Chance U fame. John Franklin. And then at tight end, you got Rob Gronkowski, O.J. Howard, Cameron Brate, and that's 3D. Okay, those are skills. Also, you drafted Tristan Wirfs in the first round of the draft out of Iowa, who might be the most athletic offensive lineman in the last 3 years. And then on your base 3-4 defense, you got Ndamukong Suh, Vita Vea, William Golston, Jason Pierre-Paul. Oh, Lord. And then at middle linebacker, you got Devin White, who was Buckus Award winner. You got Shaq Barrett, who announced himself last year as one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. You got Antoine Winfield Jr., who was a Paycom Jim Thorpe Award semifinals out of Minnesota. And your added Parnell Motley, who I thought should have been drafted in the first place on that defense. Like, I didn't think that I was going to be that enthusiastic about watching Tampa Bay play football. But with this assortment of dudes that I absolutely know can play, and this assortment of old men who look breakable, like Brady and Gronkowski, you want to talk about reality television, I think I'm here for this. Like, at least I'm here for the start of it. If it turns out to be bad, then I won't watch it. But with that list of names that I just rattled off, are you not at least intrigued by what Tampa Bay is going to do?
Oh no, I'm super intrigued. This is the type of team that you put together in Madden, or better yet, that you hate other people picking in Madden.
Right.
But collected in real life. So if this team turns out to be good, they're going to be fun to watch. If they turn out to be bad, it's going to be like, okay, of course, just like every failed super team that's ever been thrown together. And that's going to be its own particular type of train wreck, and it depends on how it happens too. If it's kind of like I'm gonna jump to basketball, like the Heat dropping it to the Mavericks, and we all point and laugh, as they were kind of good, but they got wrecked by people that had great chemistry. Or if it's just something that just the wheels fall off, like Tom Brady folds like a 40-year-old man. Gronkowski gets chopped in the thigh again because that's the only way people are going to attack him. The O-line steps in a handful of pit holes in the turf. Like, there's no way that the season that they're going to put together isn't going to be consistently intriguing and entertaining all the way until the final weeks.
All right, then I guess I'm watching both Tampa and New England this year in addition to the Dallas Cowboys.
I mean, you were forced to watch Tampa anyway. You know that. I know that.
Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Maybe it'll be on one of those off weeks that Al Michaels is gonna have. Yeah, they enforcing some off weeks for your mans. It's like they're trying to push him out of his chair. I know that they're trying to put Mike Tirico in his chair. All right, so I want to finish with a couple sleepers and a couple of stories for these sleepers as it relates to college football. Okay, and I want to start with Charleston Rambo, who's not a sleeper, but I'm getting there. So Charleston Rambo began last year with 3 consecutive 100-yard receiving performances in the first 4 games. Or I should say it's 3 out of 4. And that was as the number 2 wide receiver on the depth chart to CeeDee Lamb in a really great year for CeeDee Lamb. And if Jalen Hurts was better at pushing the ball downfield, we're not talking about Charleston Rambo going for 743 yards with 5 tutties. We're probably getting close to 1,000, maybe even 1,200. But he was supposedly breakout star of last year. He's going to be the star wide receiver for whatever Oklahoma turns out to be this year. But over at Baylor, where Charlie Brewer is still a concussion away from not playing football ever again, but he's going to start, you have 2 dudes that can absolutely fly at wideout. One is R.J. Sneed, because, twin out there just making it happen. And then the other is Tyquan Thornton. Tyquan Thornton, as a sophomore, with Denzel Mims and R.J. Sneed taking catches away, still put up 782 yards with 5 touchdowns and averaged 17.4 yards per catch. If Tyquan Thornton takes the leap that I think he's going to take, we might be talking about him getting drafted in the first round. So that's sleeper number 1. Keep your eye on him. Sleeper number 2 might be my new favorite player in the Big 12. Might be my favorite player in the Big 12 before it's all said and done. Because the most fun I ever had watching somebody else not named OU play football was watching how my man's Darren Sproles put every last one of y'all on skates. Put on the afterburners and you could not catch him. Is the holy terror of the 2003 Oklahoma Sooners, which might be the best OU football team of all time. I kid you not. Just look at the depth chart. Just look at the talent. And Darren Sproles took it apart by his damn self. All 5'7" of him. Well, now, Kansas State got a dude at tailback whose name is Deuce Vaughn. Deuce played for the Cedar Ridge Raiders. And at the Cedar Ridge Raiders, Deuce put up 5,472 all-purpose yards with 50 tutties. He rushed for 4,405 yards, 38 tutties. He had 914 yards, 11 touchdowns receiving. Returned 4 kicks for tutties. Set school records for single season rushing, 1,940 yards. And single game rushing with 406 for the Ridge Raiders. His daddy, Chris, was an NFL scout, is an NFL scout for the Dallas Cowboys, spent 18 years as an assistant at Arkansas, Ole Miss, Memphis, and Texas, and played collegiately at Murray State. And my favorite fact about Deuce Vaughn, my man is 5'5", $170. Ron, RJ's revenge is about to be wearing the purple for the Wildcats.
I hope he's good, and I hope you get his jersey.
I feel like for the two of us, that's a dig. For them, they don't know that, but okay. I hope he's good. I want him to be so good. What if he, because like, all right, you got Chris Kleiman at head coach, okay? You got Courtney Messingham, who made, coleslaw out of, what that stuff that you find in a commode in their offense. You return Skylar Thompson, even as you don't return most of the offensive line. What I'm saying here is, if that man goes for 1,500 yards this year in 10 games, all purpose, is that a win?
Absolutely it is.
Okay. What's he going to have to do to get on Darren's level, apart from being as short as Darren?
You caught me at a loss on that one.
Oh, for real? I thought Darren Sproles were still in your head, like still in your wheelhouse.
I mean, you would have to be the feature back. That's what it would have to be. Or better yet, you would have to make it to the league and then be a feature back. That's the only way that you can get on his level or surpass it. Become a fantasy favorite. Make me money, basically.
Okay.
Make all of us money on a very personal level.
Well, I mean, there is fantasy football in college, and I'm pretty good at it. Good enough to make money at it. So yeah, I'm gonna watch that. I do want it to go just a little bit over my fantasy football team because I think my fantasy football team is cold. So I'm gonna just throw these names out here because I play in a keeper league, and my two keepers were Alvin Kamara and Josh Jacobs in a PPR league. Points per reception. So dudes that run the ball, dudes to catch the ball. Like that's what I wanted. So that freed me up to make my draft about wide receivers. And I thought that I did a pretty damn good job. So at quarterback, I got Tom Brady because, QBs and whatnot. On the shelf, I got Jared Goff in case Tom turns out to be 43 this year. I got Tyreek Hill at wideout. I got Gronkowski at tight end, which is a gamble, I admit, because I didn't go get a better tight end. And then I got T.Y. Hilton at wideout. I got CeeDee Lamb at wideout. I got Justin Tucker at kicker. I got the Seahawks defense. And I got Jerry Jeudy, Sterling Shepard on the shelf with Darrell Henderson. I say all that to say, somehow CBS Sports gave me a ridiculous C- grade on all of this. And I'll be like, I'm gonna show you CBS Sports. I am. I'm not gonna take this. So here's to me winning a national championship. Ron, parting thought.
If you have the time and the money, go to a drive-in, go watch a movie. It might be the worst film viewing experience you'll have, but it might be the best film going experience you ever have.
Okay. I will take you up on that. That is Ron Taylor. Follow him on the Twitters at Ron of All Trades. Joins me on Mondays to talk about, whatever. And he's my best friend. Most of the stuff that you enjoy from this podcast and from this live show and from this channel are things that he put in my head or he set up personally. The man is the smartest person that I really actually know. Download the RJ Young Show podcast. Wherever it is you get your podcast. We do the live streams on Mondays and Wednesdays at 3, Fridays at 3 when I feel like it, but you'll see how it is. And then the Saturday podcast is always fun because it's a little bit off the beaten path, and it's going to be some people that you've heard from. It's going to be from some guests that I didn't know that I could get. Rate it, review it. If you leave a 5-star review and it's a nice review, I will read it on the show. Thanks for joining. We'll see y'all in a couple of days.